The black working class communities continue to bear the brunt of the electricity crisis. This is according to the research report, Energy Racism, the Electricity Crisis in South Africa. That's the title of this particular paper, which is released by the University of Johannesburg's Department of Sociology. Joining me now is one of the authors of this research paper, Dr. Trevor Ngwane, who talks to us now. Dr. Ngwane, thank you very much for your time. Why do you think that it is black townships that are the ones who are bearing the brunt of being cut off from electricity?
Thank you, Coley, and your viewership. Yes, there's a special program by Eskom called load reduction. It is in addition to load shedding. And according to Eskom, it targets black areas in the sense that it targets overcrowded areas. It targets areas where people cannot afford to pay. It targets areas where there's illegal connection. So in a way, basically, if you look at the schedule of load reduction, it is Soshanguve, it is Gugulethu, Lamontville, Soweto, all the black working class areas, townships, shared settlements, and indeed rural villages.
Your paper, Dr. Ngwane, this is something that you've obviously researched with the co-authors of this paper that you have released. What in the main is the key motivator for why you think that black townships have become almost the ones who are facing this electricity racism, as you call it?
Yes, it's historical. Remember that under apartheid, black workers would dig out the coal which fired, the energy furnaces, but you'd find that black working class areas did not have electricity. Now we find a continuity in the new South Africa where various reasons are provided, various obstacles are set, between black working class people getting access to safe energy. So there's that continuity. The other thing, of course, is the coincidence of race and class in South Africa. So when they say they target poor areas, invariably is areas where the majority of people who live there are black. The last point is that, of course, racism takes many forms. Unfortunately, our black government has bought into narratives of racism, such as the idea that there's a culture of non-payment, or somehow black people don't deserve the same amount of power as the rich and the white people. That's only because, the leadership, the political leadership, has decided to join rather than confront and fight against, those who benefited from apartheid.
Yeah, let me challenge you a little bit there, Dr. Ngwane. And the reason I'm using the word challenge is that some people have said that it is in the very same communities where some of the community members are deliberately not paying for electricity, and some even recall the times when former president, the late president Nelson Mandela, was president, where he apparently had promised that there would be free electricity in the area of Soweto, for example. The other argument here is that the same communities, I'm not sure how you do this, but there doesn't seem to be a way to prevent cable theft. The community comes together in your community forums, for example, that fight crime, to say we are going to guard against this infrastructure because it is the very same infrastructure that gets us electricity into our homes. So in essence, the question I'm asking you is that how do these communities deal with challenges that some people will say you are self-defeatist in a way.
Yes, I think it's a valid point, Chloe, and it needs, time to interrogate it in depth. But for this conversation, I would say that, firstly, there's the issue of apartheid geography. So, certain people find themselves living in these communities. So, if you are, whether you pay or not, if you live in Kukuletu and ESCOM or the electricity authorities decide to load reduce you, you suffer. Can you see? So, in a way, there is that blanket punishment, of these areas or of people who live in these areas, irrespective of their personal or individual conduct. So that is why we call it energy racism, because it's based on a kind of racial profiling where it is just assumed that if you live in Soweto, you are, got a catch-off non-payment, you don't pay, you are illegally connected. So that is one thing. The other, of course, is that in a way, we are blaming the victims of apartheid. We are blaming the victims of energy racism, of the electricity crisis. So instead of finding ways of addressing those issues which end up with people not paying or being unable to pay, by the way, I mean, given the high unemployment rate, given the starvation wages people earn, given the atrocious servicing these areas get, you find that in some instances there's a transformer or a substation which explodes. It takes weeks, months, even years to fix it. Whereas if that happened in Sentin or at Umhlanga Rocks, it would be repaired within 24 hours. So those are all the issues we have to look at. And I think the best way, Chloe, is to use a social justice perspective rather than, one which is overladen with past prejudices against the black working class.
Yeah. As we conclude the conversation looking into some of the proposed solutions, because when you write a paper like this, you start with the challenges and you try and find how do you overcome this, and then the solutions come. How are these communities, Dr. Ngwane, firstly coping with and responding collectively or even individually to this crisis? Because that's how solutions are going to come about ultimately.
Yes, the worst part, especially for someone like myself, Chloe, I'm a scholar activist, I work with social movements, I try to help in getting people to organize themselves, to form movements, organizations, defending their interests. But what has happened over time, people are getting despondent. If you go to Soweto, half the robots, the street lights are not working because each time people do the toy, they pull down the robots. Now everyone is saying, what is the use of doing this? So in a way, people are starting to feel that there is no solution. There is no collective solution to these problems. So you find those with money will buy a generator. Those with money, will put in solar systems. But basically, since the majority are poor, they are left out, in the cold without electricity. So I really think that what we need to do primarily is to recognize that there is energy inequalities. The people who use the most energy, the intensive users of energy, are those who are rich, big business, the upper middle class, the bourgeoisie. And then if you target poor communities actually for reducing, demand, you are actually backing the wrong tree, if you know what I'm trying to say, Tony. So basically, our government, our leaders don't have the courage to confront the intensive energy users. So they start scapegoating the poor. But that is not the way to solve the problem. Because, of course, you can keep all the black areas dark, but you'll never, solve the question of demand. Because it is the rich, it is big business, it is the mines who use most of our electricity.
Dr. Trevor Ngwane, let me thank you very much for your time. He is part of the research team that penned this latest paper. It's Energy Racism, the Electricity Crisis in South Africa. He is a co-author there. Let's